So really exciting here. Obviously, we're kind of going through some of the wonderful Copilot-based capabilities inside of Dynamics 365. So today is going to be really kind of action-packed as we go through Copilot Studio and we start looking at automated agents inside of Copilot Studio. Many of the features, as you probably have already heard, have been kind of in preview basically, and they continue to be for the automated agents. But the really cool thing about it is that they're starting to go into many different environments, right? And with those environments, there are new use cases, new scenarios, new capabilities that are being introduced. And today we wanted to just go a little bit deeper on how you can use automated agents, obviously, to tackle some of those business system workloads that you may have. And we're going to tackle this in a lot of different varieties, I guess. More specifically, we're going to tackle it from an end user perspective because remember, part of the enablement longer term here from a Copilot Studio perspective is that every single person on the planet is supposed to be able to have a Copilot, to have a virtual assistant that can help you get your job done more effectively and more efficiently, obviously. So at this point, I'm not going to say that we're there, right? Let's look at the reality of it. But at the same point, a lot of companies are doing it from a departmental perspective. I have been on more calls in the last 2 weeks around AI enablement and the customization of Copilot than I have been in all of 2024. So a lot of companies obviously are looking at the investment here after seeing the momentum in 2024, and a lot of them made that a strategic decision to move forward with that obviously then for 2025, which is why we're becoming more involved in those conversations. So today, I want to just give you as many nuggets as I can in terms of Copilot Studio, how you use automated agents, why would you use an automated agent versus using, for example, a Power Automate flow, for example, because you can kind of do the same things with it, but why would you use one or the other? And so today we're really just going to go through that a little bit more and answer all those different types of questions that you may have. And with that, let me do some housekeeping here just to kind of start. So welcome to Stoneridge Confab, right? I'm your host, Scott Frappier, and basically what we do is we go through and we discuss all the different technologies that are in the business system space. So if you've looked at a lot of our videos in the past, we'll cover things like EAM or Enterprise Asset Management, or we'll cover, for example, our leverage ISV capability for agricultural-based scenarios where we've got grain or commodities that need to be tracked and then basically purchased and delivered. So there's lots of different technologies that we focus on, and what we do at Stoneridge is we have an eye towards obviously the Microsoft stack and how Microsoft uses those technologies to basically address either productivity or business system needs. And I will say this, I feel, because Stoneridge is a part of who I have been growing up here in this wonderful reality that we have, but more specifically, we try to tell the reality of where things are at, not the marketing perspective of it, because when it comes to a business system, just really candidly, business leaders, the technology, there are some companies that really love technology, right? And they become technology companies like Microsoft. But for example, we service manufacturers, we service distributors, we basically, any professional services firm that needs like project management, that's what our software does. And once again, the technology is nice, but it's not the end all be all, so to speak. So what we try to look at from a Stoneridge perspective is how do we incorporate these types of technologies in a business process to really align then to the business objectives that a company has. And just quite candidly, every company is going to have a different business objective. I know a lot of people are like, a company is there to make money. Well, it is, but there are some companies that don't prioritize money. There are other companies that, for example, prioritize the technology evolution. And there are others that focus on the culture or the people. And then the balance of some of the others focus on the balance with it, right? So part of technology is to help deliver basically the results that the business needs. And I will tell you, my favorite type of business isn't the money type of business. The money's nice because obviously we need it, but it's the cultural ones where you've got the ability to impact people's lives by allowing them to go home early and spend time with families, or to do things beyond just work. because all work and no play made Mike a really dull boy from what I've heard in the past. So with that, let's go through and have a couple of things that we're going to tidy up here. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be going through Copilot Studio, and I'm going to share it on the screen. And Leah, thank you very much for that. If you've got any topics that you would like to have as well in Confab, put them in the chat. We'd love to hear about them and kind of go through that in a little bit more detail, as you can imagine. But today what we're going to do is we're really going to focus on that Copilot Studio element. And we're going to focus on the automated agents that I have in one of my pre-sales environments. And really what I'd like to do with that is go through as much as possible and do a setup of some scenarios that we can tackle. What I would really appreciate from you, the audience, would be if you have any questions, post them in chat. I'm going to be continually monitoring that. And then at the same point, if you've got feedback or capability questions, candidly, this is free consulting time, right? I've been booked pretty solid lately for all these different types of Copilot things, so if you want to get a little bit of a head start, hopefully I'll be able to do that for you today. So market-wise, let's just do a quick market update too. DeepSeek, right? So some of the things I just want to get in front of here if you're listening to, obviously, this confab. So there's been a lot of momentum inside of our industry from an AI perspective. And as all of you know, there's been a huge hardware investment by a lot of these different hardware vendors, such as NVIDIA and also AMD as an example as well, where they're basically creating GPUs or AI accelerators that are really good at basically loading AI into memory so that we can use it. We call that an inference technically. So recently there was a new model that came out that everyone was like, oh my gosh, this is absolutely amazing. And it is kind of amazing, but I wanted to kind of just set the record straight with it, because one of the things that is really obvious about this is people really don't understand how AI works. And I'm going to say a couple of things with that to hopefully educate with it, because quite candidly, DeepSeek would not exist without the existing language models that you have with OpenAI's GPT-4, GPT-01, and then even our Omni 3 that we have that they just also released in retort to that R1 from a DeepSeek perspective. So cool thing about that, just so we all know, when we look at DeepSeek, remember there's some really great things that came out of that entire conversation. More specifically, what DeepSeek is as a language model is it's what's called a distilled language model. And what that means is that it's almost like this teacher-student based concept that was applied towards it to be able to train that model to basically then be a lower cost training methodology so that it could get to market faster, and also then run on cheaper hardware with cheaper precision basically as we go through that. So net result of it is that, remember, with DeepSeek, it's a lot faster basically, right? It's something that is basically cheaper to implement. It can run even locally on computers as well, but the accuracy of it isn't as good as the large models like Omni 1 when running in production settings. And that is a very important distinction here when it comes to that. So DeepSeek was trained by using existing models, and think about the training process. When you learn to play a saxophone, is the one I always use in our company, you don't know what a G is, and eventually over time you know that the top 3 fingers on a saxophone create that G note, right? But you've got to train your brain to do that through a lot of trial and error, right? And that's the same concept when it comes to any of these large language models, is you're basically going through and training a pattern so that when it's presented with this set of data that is a pattern, that it matrices, it basically builds a matrix of that data, goes through a large language model, and then from there it determines what that pattern is in that magical large language model. And part of the training portion of it up front is that you basically tell the language model whether it was successful or it failed. And if it failed, it does a thing called backpropagation, where you basically take an inverse, you basically track throughout the entire model what was a higher weight that got to the wrong answer, so that you can then lower that weight or that connection and then raise the connection on the path you want it to have as part of that back propagation element that's a part of large language models. Now, I don't expect us to all know that or to go into detail with it, but the key thing here is that they use what's called a distilled model. And what a distilled model is it basically goes through and uses these other large language models to verify its training data. So imagine that you're a student and you ask then, is this right or is this wrong? And then we use another AI system to then say whether it is right or wrong, instead of a human being that's going through and doing that, right? And in terms of the accuracy and in terms of then the results with that, we've seen that with these newer models that are really accurate, that this is now something that doesn't cause all those different types of what we call hallucinations, where if you train a model from another model, it gets like really kind of wonky in terms of what its output and response is. So once again, remember that DeepSeek R1 would not exist fundamentally, even in its training perspective, without the larger models that we use from a Microsoft perspective with 4 Omni, and also then with 4 Omni Mini, and then hopefully here Omni 1 and then Omni 3 as the reasoning models that are out there. So just, it's interesting to hear the market, what's going on with it. We saw a huge wipeout of AI in terms of NVIDIA, in terms of the stock with it. Reality here, team, the more hardware we have to be able to run inferences, the better. Now, maybe we don't have specific hardware, but I will say that the precision that is used inside of these models, for example, a lot of the models that you when you download from DeepSeek are actually a 4-bit model, and 8-bit is actually more common than in terms of the precision, in terms of the accuracy of the weights that are there. So just know that it's something that it's going to be good, because what it does push the industry to do, in my opinion, is to find lower cost models, because these token transactions for many customers have been very, very confusing, and I would love to lower that cost basically of interacting with AI. So from, I think, any true AI enthusiast or anyone that's in the industry, we feel that DeepSeek R1 is a fantastic perspective that doesn't solve our immediate challenge of training more complex models, because we need accuracy in those models, but may make it so that we can distill other models in a more cheaper fashion to use all the good things that are in this bigger model, but have a cheaper model that we can use as a part of it. So once again, just wanted to get that out there. It's a very interesting development. Cool thing about that, if you want to, with Azure AI Foundry, you can spin up your own DeepSeek R1 model, or your Llama model, or your OpenAI Omni 1 model. So just remember, from a Microsoft perspective, even though our Copilot offering runs technically on a GPT-4 Omni or 4 Omni Mini model, basically we do not need to then worry about that model change as much from a Microsoft perspective, because you're going to be able to get access to that to use that for your custom copilots that you want to create. And as Microsoft evaluates the accuracy, the response, the balance between hardware, and then also profitability, as you can imagine as well from a budget perspective, they're going to look at the right model that is the cheapest, that provides the best results, right? So Copilot, fundamentally, in terms of all the offering that we have built out around it, will allow us then to use those models. So it's a really awesome development, because remember, we're designing around an architecture, not as much around just the core large language model. It's great when those update, but the apps had to get it with the sidecar experience, with the communication channel back to the orchestrator, to the large language model, right? I could go on and on with that. So either way, I just wanted to bring it up because it's been a big topic that a lot of people have been talking about, and once again, I think it's a very positive thing. So with that, let's go ahead and go into our Copilot Studio. And Deb, thank you for the shirt. I am not weird. I am limited edition. That is the way I look at my life right now. So I'm going to go ahead and basically pull up my presentation screen inside of here, and we should see hopefully my main screen. Let's go ahead and go into Copilot Studio and start looking at the automated agent-based capabilities that we have inside of here. So first thing that I typically do here is going to be to go to Copilot Studio, right? So if you type in copilotstudio.microsoft.com and go to it, what's going to happen is it's going to go through and then log you in, obviously, into your designer that you use to basically go through and extend different types of Copilots inside of our Microsoft platform. Now, what's really cool about this is that they abstracted really the pro code perspective more into, or pro dev more into Copilot Studio for the extension methodology that you use to basically add on to Copilot. Now, there are many different paths here that you can use, and what I mean by that is that we're looking at a low-code, no-code based scenario for this, but there are going to be other scenarios that you may want to snap in, for example, a plugin into Graph. And just so you know, there are pro-code ways then to basically get to that level. So remember, you have the ability basically to go through and still do pro dev extensions to Copilot, but the reason we focus on Copilot Studio is because Microsoft is really focusing on that citizen developer, that low code, no code, to go faster to basically roll out features inside of an application. And so as we think about the Power Platform, that's why it exists. There's a lot of people that have gotten a lot of greatness out of that platform. The same concept really is being applied then to here, which is going to be basically our Copilot Studio as we go through that process. So I'm going to go ahead just really quickly here. I'm actually in my wrong login, so I'm going to go ahead and sign out of that login, and then we'll do Copilot Studio again, and I'm going to hope that it actually prompts me for my pre-sales login. And what I should see here then, there we go, is that I can log into my pre-sales environment here, and we should then have our wonderful, wonderful, wonderful Copilot Studio. So what is Copilot Studio? Copilot Studio is where you develop and extend Copilots in the Microsoft 365 platform, basically on Microsoft. So as you can see here, when I click on my home action inside of here, this is where I can create an agent, right? And the cool thing about this is that you have the ability to access all of these different agents that are inside of here as well. So you have the ability to even see some of the different types of agents that have been created that you can interact with. Now today what we're going to do is we're going to create an agent from scratch. We're basically going to create what's called an automated agent. Now the difference between an automated agent and the classical agent, or just a regular agent that's not automated, really is just that you're adding what's called a trigger to then start that particular agent so that it will do a particular action then as part of that. And there's things to note with this. So as part of it, Microsoft has been refining really what the actual licensing is for that in terms of messages and message counts and things of that nature. So just note that there is a bit of that to consider when you're going through and designing these, because depending upon what you use as a feature inside of your agent, it costs more messages, which then costs an X amount of dollars then to be able to do that. So if you have questions around that, what I would really recommend is actually reach out to our team. We've got a lot of good background on that that we can use then to help you kind of understand then what that budgetary constraint is going to be as we go through that. But here, what we're going to do, like I said, is basically build that Copilot. And how easy can it be? Well, I don't want to make this too easy. I don't want to just go into Copilot and then describe an agent. Let's go through more of a manual creation perspective here. And then obviously with the create, it's going to automate a lot of those different types of actions by taking the text that you type in and then maybe creating topics and doing some of those updates as part of that process. So with that, if we go ahead and click on the create action inside of here, what I should see then is basically an ability to create a new agent and or to explore the use of other agents that are inside of here. So if you want to have a benefits administrator where you point it then to your benefit details, well, you could create a benefit agent inside of here to stand this up. And if you've used Power Virtual Agents before, this probably looks kind of familiar, because remember, Copilot Studio was formerly known as basically the wonderful Power Virtual Agents in the past as well. So I'm going to go ahead and put myself as Do Not Disturb because I got pinged there in a second. So let's go ahead and create a new agent. So I'm going to click on that agent, and basically it's going to have me go through and describe what I want this agent to be. So this I could skip to configure, but let's just go through some of these steps to basically do this setup. So what do we want our agent to do? Well, what I want this agent to do is I'm going to make a personal agent, and I want this agent basically to check emails, and if it determines that it is a critical email, and I'll give some criteria, and what I'd love would be in chat here, team, go ahead and post some things that you think would influence what would be critical or not. But if it is critical, what I want it to do is I want it to maybe, I don't know, send me a text message or create a file or do a particular action, right, to basically inform me that there's a critical email that came through. Now you're going to look at me and say, Scott, we can do that right now with Outlook rules. Well, you can, but you can't do what I'm going to show next, which is having agents communicate potentially with each other to then have multi-agent scenarios where you can then use very specific agents and scenarios to drive some of that processing. Now, here's why yeah, priority level, right? That would be a good one, Jesse. I love it. So here's why I bring that up. So if you think about it, when we look at these agents right now, one of the things that I am recommending to every single individual that starts going into Copilot Studio is to not create what we call monolith-based agents. A monolith agent would be an agent that does everything. And so you'll have thousands of topics potentially inside of there. Now you can do that, and there are going to be some use cases that are for it, but by modularizing these particular agents a little bit, what you can do is you can have more focus then on that agent, on the knowledge base repository, so that there's not even like duplicate topic confusion and things of that nature. Because really at this point, like with Copilot Studio, like I'd really love where they'd have like some type of grouping logic that they could add in the topics, so we could actually categorize things a little bit better to have a bigger agent. But for now, what I'd really recommend would then be to basically separate those. But the problem that we have then with that is the fact that if you put all that knowledge into an agent, how do you then get it to another agent? And with human beings, we communicate with each other. So I'm going to show you some concepts that you can use then to potentially create that type of communication path as you go through some of that processing. And I think once you see it, you're going to be like, that's so simple and may scale in some situations. There's probably going to be better answers, but it's not something I hear out in the wild really being talked about. And I think it's a very important topic because as people are building more of these agents, they're going to have these topics, they're going to have conditionals and logic that get them to the output of that topic. We're going to need to have some way to communicate as a part of it. So we're going to start a new project and say, I'm going to say this is going to be a bot that basically helps organize my daily inbox details so that I can be informed better as to critical issues that come up that need my attention, right? So we'll do that as a part of it, and we'll go ahead and click that. So let's go through this. Jesse had the priority level, like I mentioned. Carly, I saw that you can create an agent that gives you weather updates. Much needed during this unpredictable MN weather. Yeah, that's a really good one too, right? And I'll show some of that too. Great. Now let's determine a name for your your agent. How does the inbox organizer sound to you? Sounds great. Right? We'll say something like that. And we'll see where it goes with this. The agent has been updated. Would you like to emphasize or avoid it in your agent's behavior? No, we'll let the agent be wide open, right? Whatever we want it to do. I want it to take over the world, basically. So, and then what I'm going to do here, because I did notice that I'm a little bit in the way here, so let's go ahead and I'm going to put myself right there for you so you can kind of see as I'm going through this. So anything that should be emphasized, and so it's going to go through basically that portion of it. Sometimes team, like I've said before, we've seen this on prior confabs too. Remember, what you can do here is that sometimes it may fail, just retry the query and it'll basically then recover off of that. So in this situation, we can see that it is still waiting for us, and of course, it's not a demo until you break something and it takes forever to complete with it. So what we're going to see here, though, will be basically the next step, which we'll be asking then, is there a specific type of tone or any type of detail that you would like to have with this particular conversation when you're doing it, right? And so we'll wait for it just to kind of wrap up here, and as it does that, what I may do here is I may just skip to configure, so that way we don't have to worry about it waiting then on a large language model to get those replies back. Now, one thing to note here, remember, I am in a development environment, so I'm in what we call our pre-sales tenant for StoneRidge software, which means that the usage on that tenant is not as high, which means that the hardware allocation towards that tenant is going to be changed from a Microsoft perspective. So just note that different times are going to have different impacts then on what we're going to be interacting with it. But if you run into this issue, like I said, Let's go ahead and just skip to configure and get that detail kind of figured out and then created as a part of that. So what I did, bypassed it, taking too long. Let's go ahead and click on create, and we're going to go ahead and basically create that initial agent inside of here. So once the agent has been set up, we should now have the ability to go through and basically start setting up some additional details around that agent. So just as an example inside of here, I have the ability to basically go through and then set up what we call knowledge repositories, actions, or triggers that are related then to this. Now, in order for an agent to be used as an automated agent, we need to basically enable the generative AI capabilities of that agent to be able to then use really those automated triggers. So what I would do here is I would go, for example, into my settings portion of this, and in my generative AI, I would actually make it a generative AI based capability inside of here, right? And in this example, let's go ahead and turn on the image input. I absolutely love that capability, and I want to see kind of what we could use that for. We've used it in ag for quite a bit of things, which has been kind of fun, so we'll see what this can do as well. Either way, we'll go ahead and click on save as a part of it, and what we should now see when we go back to our agent is that we are now enabled for really that orchestration as part of that, with users and events as part of it, right? So down here is where we typically then set up the different types of triggers that are going to call this agent. So what you can kind of look at this with right now is that it's an agent that has a couple of topics in it. So if I click on the topics, we can see here that it really has 4 custom topics that says thank you, goodbye, a greeting, and then a start over, right? And these are triggered, if I look at the goodbye as an example here, triggered by the agent basically when a particular action or different thing happens. And what you can do here, remember, is that you can always look at, for example, the code view here if you want to be able to see then what those triggers are or what the query is that's related to it. So if I say bye, bye for now, goodbye, whatever it is, that's when it actually goes then into basically this topic to go through that process. So once again, this set up some scaffolding for us basically as we went through this to really drive some of that additional interaction. Now, one of the important things here from this perspective is the fact that I may want to add then a different type of a trigger that calls this particular agent, right? And in that agent, maybe the trigger is when I actually get a email into my inbox, that's when I want it to happen. Or I want it to basically create that or do something with it when A, B, C, whatever it is, right? A trigger basically, or an event that occurs with it. Well, couple things I can do with that. Now, number one, what I could do inside of here is go to the triggers and click on the add trigger based capability. And this is where we get into some of the triggers that you can basically set up natively that then drive the actual agent to start going down its topic path or processing path for it. So you could do it, for example, when an item is created, or when a file is created, or when a new email arrives as an example, or when a record or row is added into Dataverse as a part of it, right? So there's these different triggers then that can be exposed that you can then interact with. And the really cool thing about it is that you're going to be able to, in the future here, add then different triggers beyond that. So if I look at all of the different triggers that are inside of here, we now have triggers when we have a Power BI scenario. So let's say we set up thresholds that are related then to a report. Well, we can actually have triggers that look at Power BI so that when a data condition occurs, and if you click on it just as an example inside of here, basically what you can do then is start the agent to do some type of automation. So you could actually have it, for example, if something's out of whack in terms of revenue, you could actually have a trigger then that allows you to send or grab all of the detail, because you create a Power Automate that grabs then all of the detail and then sends that then to the team that they can use then to review, well, why are we off on revenue, for example, for that. So this allows us to basically go through and set up those triggers then to really then align with what you want an agent to start with. And this is where it gets really cool. This is where, for example, with Dataverse, when a row is added, modified, or deleted, you could use that for inter-agent communication, because you can create a table that you can also then trigger when a row is added, modified, or deleted, where in that particular trigger then what it will do is it will communicate potentially with another agent in the organization. And you can track and log that. You can pass whatever data you want between then those particular agents, and then from there you've got a whole log. You can set up a cleanup agent then too, so every 30 days it cleans up the data that's inside of there. But it's a fantastic way then to use Dataverse for your agents to basically communicate back and forth as a part of it. So a really, really cool feature, and I have not heard many people starting to use it yet, but I'm using it constantly as I go through my agent build-outs. So let's go through and look at a new email. So what I'm going to do, we'll go to our featured, go back to when a new email arrives, and what we're going to do is basically get this trigger set up related to this. So basically, Outlook 365, we can see that it's actually using my pre-sales environment for it. Now, mind you, you may want to use a different login, right, for this. So maybe you're creating this for some other scenario or for a shared mailbox. Maybe you've got a service account that you use, and you know that's what you then have, a shared mailbox that you access. So you would be able to obviously tackle that then as part of it. So here we have the Outlook one that's inside of here. We should see hopefully it come back because I did not change the connection reference, even though it looks like I thought I did. So we can do that. We'll do the trigger again. We'll do a new email. We'll wait for it to finish this trigger creation. So when a new email arrives, we're going to then run Copilot Studio. So we're going to see a specific folder, right? So when an new email goes into, I don't know, we'll call it our inbox, and in our inbox, do I have any other folders? Oh, I've got automated order create. We'll use that folder, how about? So, and then I can put in just, for example, additional criteria that are related to it. If the importance, for example, is high, low, whatever it is. But basically, what I can do then is I can use this then to say, use content from the body and also include the priority and importance details, so I can make a decision on whether or not this should be escalated to me as part of your processing, right? So really cool, really easy. Instead of creating programming language to tell a computer what to do, which I could with the conditional, I could actually say, look at this field. If this field has a higher priority of this, then do this. Instead, I'm being broad in a prompt response as a part of it to see how it's going to react to start. And here's the really cool thing, and this is where people are starting to get it, and it's really exciting to see it when the light bulb goes off. This is the new programming language, prompting. Prompting is a programming language. You're using it to tell a machine what to do from a conditional perspective, and instead of writing C# to do it, you're using natural language to basically go through and then create that particular action. So it's a really cool capability, and it really starts making, if you think about some of the application development scenarios, especially in low-code scenarios, so much faster. Once again, this is something that we train through when we do AI enablement with our customers and when we talk with prospects even. Don't think about AI as something that is going to change your software development lifecycle, your SDLC, right? Instead, it is a component, like the Power Platform was a component when we moved to programming languages, move from programming languages, obviously, to low-code, no-code as a part of it, right? So just know that that is what we're looking at here, and that these prompts, obviously, we can use it to optimize even our process. As an example with that, when doing your SDLC, you may have a functional requirements document that you have to create. Well, you know what you can do now to do the developer comments on the FRD or FDD after you're done doing that, or a functional design document? Well, what you can do is you can take your code, put it into, for example, a large language model, say, write me up a summary of what this code does for each of these classes, and then I can just copy and paste it into basically Word or whatever that document exists in. I mean, come on, like, it just makes it so much easier, and it doesn't have to be exactly perfect, because I will just say this, I have never seen developer documentation that's perfect. In fact, most developers will tell you it's documented in the code, because the code is the documentation for it, right? So either way, it just makes it a little bit easier then to even instill these processes in your base SDLC. So there's a lot of goodness that you can use as a part of it. So what we're going to do though is we're going to go ahead and create that trigger inside of here. So when a new email arrives, this is basically then what should happen as we go through this process. So we click on that create, we're going to see this trigger get generated, and then in a second, we have now created an automated agent inside of here. So this is just a really cool concept because now we can add as many different triggers as we want. So maybe it's inbox, maybe we want to call this, like we rename it and say our personal or our business organizer. And an example of that would be, you know, I guess just high level would be like, let's connect to chat too, like you could do Teams chat, that you can connect as a trigger as well. Or what you could do in scenarios that you do not have a connection. And this is something that's going to exist for a lot of you because we're still building out what those triggers are. And quite candidly, Power Automate, you know, the flows and the trigger library that's there, I really do expect a lot of those triggers to be more available inside of Copilot Studio longer term. But in the meantime, if you have something that you can use Power Automate with to trigger the creation of data inside of a Dataverse table, you can then integrate any application potentially in this process flow, right? You may have to use Power Automate in a flow to be the front end to take that app and then put that data into a table, and then maybe even a Power Automate so that when you do a response, it goes back into the application. But quite candidly, you still have the ability to do it, and really then the business logic would still be very similar, but maybe in the future you use a different trigger point with it. And that's what's really cool about this, is that you can add additional triggers inside of here as well, so that you can have more than one trigger then that basically executes then that topic as part of that process. So it's a really nice capability in that regard as well. So what's going to happen here, we're going to see, I've got to test this trigger, and we want to see if the trigger event will run. So I'm just going to preface this. I have not really gone through and tested it on this environment, so we're going to see if I break stuff. But like I said, if we haven't broken anything, we haven't done a demo yet as a part of it. So I'm going to go through some of the comments as I'm kind of logging in here as well. So a couple of things. So Tracy, from someone about something, right? Exactly, right? No idea who. Something is in it, no idea what to do with it. So, and then Carly, prompting is a programming language. It absolutely is, right? So I'm going to go ahead and let's log in with my pre-sales login here. And this should then bring us to our good old OWA days, our enterprise OWA. And I've got my automated order create that's inside of here, right? And I think that that's what we set it as. Chat, keep me honest here, but I don't think I put it in movements. Let's go ahead and put it into our automated order create. So I'm going to pop it in there, and so we now have that inside of there. So basically, when an email arrives into there, and I don't know if the move will do it, but remember with Power Automate, it does trigger it. But what will eventually happen is that when we receive that email, what should happen is that this particular agent is basically then going to be triggered off of that particular response. So it gives the whole new meaning to the term triggered now, right, as a part of it. So in this example, we had that email come in, we have the automated order create, and I'll actually add one to the test folder too, and I'll add to the automated movements too, because I don't remember which one I added it to. But what this will eventually do is run then this particular trigger to basically then align what that detail is. Now, another way that I could have done this, and maybe this is part of the trial and error perspective with this, is that, for example, in Power Automate, it can detect when a new email is added to a particular folder, but maybe, for example, inside of this design, inside of Copilot Studio, you may have a limitation compared to what you've been able to use in the past. So that's going to exist. I've actually run into a couple of different scenarios with that. I guess the key thing to note here is just go through and make sure that you're designing and looking up the documentation that relates to it to see then what drives that as an example with it. So let's go ahead and just take this and take a quick look at it. So here's the other thing that's kind of interesting here. That trigger looks like, when we click on the edit trigger inside of here, wasn't connected properly. It looks like to start, so that might be why we're having all this wonderful stuff here. But basically, if we look at this, can't sign in, let's go ahead and reconnect real quick for our Outlook. We'll do our pre-sales alignment for it. Hopefully we get the sign in for it. There we go. Let's reconnect this as a part of it. Great, we've got that. I'll reconnect this one as a part of it too. We'll accept those wonderful terms, and then I'll reconnect this one too. I don't know what's up with that SQL connection. We'll take a look at that a little bit later, basically. So that might be why our trigger wasn't ever running, right? So let's close that out. Let's go back into our trigger. Let's go and look at it in Power Automate again, and let's see if we have an issue again with that. So we're logging into that environment. We see the environments that are related to it, and hopefully it brings us up that Power Automate. So here is a very interesting concept, right? So the trigger is added in here, and what it does is it does in an environment, Power Automate, so that when a new email arrives, published, it sends a prompt to the specified Copilot for processing, and it goes to our inbox organizer as a part of it. So think about this, like, could we then use Power Automate to do all of that, right? We could actually maybe even start with Power Automate to create a trigger as opposed to creating the trigger from Copilot Studio. So maybe that's what we can use with it, right? So I'm going to put test in here again, and we're going to test this bad boy again too. So we're going to go ahead and click on the test trigger for it. And now that I have this, I think, set up properly for the connection, let's see if I add an email now that happens as to what's going on here, if we actually then get some type of a trigger fire off of it. So once again, it's not always perfect, but what we should be able to see here in a second is that there's going to be some type of a transaction that's going to be executed at some point here that then allows us to interact with that trigger. Now here's the thing that you can do. As you can see here, you can actually go then, for example, into that particular automate, and you can actually make those changes then inside of the automate too to then reflect that detail. So it looks like I may have, as you can see here, an inbox that is just not connecting properly as a part of it. So let's go ahead and debug this just a little bit more to try to figure out what's going on here. So first and foremost, we know that we have an email that was actually added, and it went into our automated order create. We've created it in the test folder as well. I'll add that just to see if it actually fires off of it. But what I'm not seeing is that as I add any of these different types of emails that are coming inbound, I'm not seeing it trigger this as a part of it. Now, a couple things I could do with it. The first would be, as an example here, what I could do is actually go ahead and press back, look at this as an example, and it looks like I've got a trigger issue with the flow checker here. Let's see what it's going on here. It hasn't been triggered successfully. Okay, so that's not a big deal at all for it. So what I'm going to do is just refresh this to see if we have any runs. That's not happening. Let's go into the flow and edit it again and just take a quick look as a part of it. Let's take a look at the email. Automated order create. Let's look at the parameters from it. So showing 1 of 9 that is there. I've got my folder. That's the automated order create that should be there. You know what? It's just, for some reason, it's not working. So let's do inbox with it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try sending an email then to this particular one. So we're going to go ahead and save this as a draft. Go back with it. Oops, not back. I always press that wrong button there. And then let's go ahead and publish that again so that we've got a newer updated version. And what I will do is I will go into my email somewhere around here as I look through my monitors. And we will pull email up, and this email is going to be for, let's go through here. Let's go to our new email. Let's create that. Let's see if I can pop it out here so we can have this in the screen so we can see it. And so this is going to be Scott F at Stone Ridge Presales. There we go. This is a super urgent email, right? Go ahead and close all that. Super urgent email. Draft with Copilot. I need you to create an email that says that it's critical that we get one of our projects addressed immediately here, right? Emergency, right? Type of a thing. So let's write the email. That's his, wow. This message finds you. I'm reaching out for you. We have a critical situation that requires our immediate attention. One of our projects has encountered an emergency. It is crucial and to address it without delay. So let's go ahead and keep it, and let's go ahead and then send this to Mr. Scott F at stoneridgepresales.com. So before I do that, let's go ahead and do the test action again with it. Let's do manual for it. Let's see if we're going to get this, right? So I'm going to close this. We'll do the testing with it as well for the trigger. I've got no inbox email that came to it. And let's go ahead and send that away and then see what happens here. So once again, this may not work, right? I may have some configuration setting in the background that's not allowing Copilot, for example, to access that email inbox to get to that detail inside of there. But, well, like I said, we'll figure that out as we go through it. So we've got that email that came in as a part of it. I'm not seeing the trigger yet execute off of it. Note that sometimes these triggers, because they are asynchronous, that it may take some time then for them to be triggered or to fire off, depending upon the email, depending upon the inbox, depending upon the environment. It looks like, once again, like Start Simple, this situation, for some reason, something's up with that folder. I may have to look at some of the settings of that folder, but the net result here is that when we moved it to the inbox, which would be more common, you're going to see then that it fired off this particular flow. And over here, if we take a look at it, at some point, hopefully, what we're going to do is also then see that trigger detail then fire off basically that Copilot Studio. And you can see here that it did do that. So really kind of cool. Some of the things that you could do then. So think about it this way. You may want the Power Automate to do some pre-screening then for that flow so that it doesn't fire off the Copilot Studio agent, because every time it fires off an automated agent, it costs 20 messages or whatever Microsoft does for the billing with it. Well, what we just showed there is that you can actually edit then that trigger in Power Automate so that basically then it will fire or not fire based upon what you put inside of that Power Automate. So think about it this way then too, and this is really cool that they finally exposed this. These different types of triggers, we have an email right now. I would really be curious, like I'm gonna try it, I'm gonna delete it, I'm gonna delete this, and I'm gonna get myself in trouble here because that's what we do on Confab. And then I'm gonna add a different trigger. Oh my gosh, look at this. Anything, any automate trigger I could probably use, and I'm gonna have to now make a confab off of this where we see what triggers can we use that are not exposed by default in that list. Well, I can access all these other triggers that are inside of here for chatter, Cyber Day, D7 messaging, but it looks like the result of that is that it's actually sending a prompt then to basically the inbox organizer, and it has then the content of the body that should also then be shared with it as it goes through that process. So really kind of cool. That's awesome. I'm a little bit curious here, as you can see, because we edited it here. I wonder if some of the references as well potentially disappeared. And actually, I take that back. The reason it disappeared is because I deleted the trigger, right? So that's why I did that. Either way, all right, great. Now we've gone through the debugging. We've been able to identify then that this Power Automate is ready. Let's go through and then create our topic. So on our topic, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new topic. And on that topic, what I want to do is I want it to be triggered by the agent, right? And what I may want to do then is to use some type of variable that's going to drive it. I could use, for example, a particular condition that's related to it. I could come in here and say, for example, for this trigger, if I click on, for example, the condition, we could do the formula as a part of it. I could look for environment variables or formulas that I can run off of it, or system-based variables with it, right? So there's different types of things that can then use this particular topic or trigger this topic when it goes through that process. So let's take a look at that. Let's go to our overview just really quickly here. Let's leave that topic. Let's go to our triggers that are inside of here. And then what we can do with these triggers is we can basically then take them and then use the trigger body to determine priority and then run through that process. So let's go ahead and save this away. I want to test it too at the same time. And let's do a topic, and let's create a new topic. And I want to create a topic, and this is going to be do stuff, no, this is typically how I do it, SSI, and this is going to be process inbox, right? So usually for the topics, as you can see here, you could do spacing with it. I always put like a 3-digit prefix in front of it, so that way basically I can then ensure that it is basically ready to be filtered, and I can see all those different topics that I've created to it. So it provides basically a way for you then to organize your topic list and to know really quickly what you've added as custom with it. So I may do something and say create a topic to when a trigger is fired for this agent, I would like to go take that content and determine whether or not a text message needs to be sent to me to let me know that there is a priority email that I need to address, right? So that's really what this topic is going to do, right, as part of the process. And so what we're going to see here is that it's going to look through, it's going to design that trigger, it's going to have basically, do you have a priority email that needs to be looked at? And it looks like it's using a variable basically as a part of that, right? So in here we've got a trigger. This looks at the inbox, it processes the inbox, and then it does something with it as a part of that, right? So we can add additional questions, we can add additional topics, we can add different pathing, we can add different triggers that are inside of here as well, right? We can, as an advanced perspective here, we can send or generate requests as well as we go through it. So there's just a lot of stuff that you can do inside of here to really then drive some of that behavior. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to go through, and in the background, I'm going to move this off to the side, and we're going to keep on taking these emails out, for example, and then re-adding them to see if this is going to perform kind of in that fashion that's needed for it, right? So we'll click on the test for it here. Actually, I take that back. I can't test it because I removed that trigger. Let's go ahead and edit it again, and then let's go ahead and look at the trigger because we did see that it ran. Let's go ahead and click on test for it. Let's move this back to the automated section for it in the background here. So we'll manually do it as a part of it. And what we should see then, hopefully, is that super urgent email that got to the inbox at some point would show up inside of here again. And so what we can do is we can then see, for example, with that trigger being fired, we can actually look at then some of the topics that could be fired with it as part of it. Yeah, Rob, right? On dark mode, it definitely helps as a part of that process, right? So in this example, then, we basically have an agent that was generated with a trigger that was created, and this trigger, then, is what we want to eventually have fire inside of here, right? So part of this is kind of going through that scaffolding to make sure, then, that we have basically what those details are and how those triggers are actually going to be fired. So what we could do inside of here is we could actually expand off of this, such as create additional triggers. We can, for example, inside of here, as part of it, instead of doing a message, if it is a priority email, what we can do is we can add an action to do another, for example, Power Automate flow to then do some particular action with it. So let's do that. So we're building out this topic even further to basically go through and drive that. So in here, what I'm going to do is basically go through and set up a flow. We can see we've got run a flow from Copilot. I'm going to say that this is going to be the body of the email that I want to have inside of here, and then I'm going to have, for example, whether or not this is a priority email or not, right? So I can define additional variables with it. In fact, what I'll do is I'll just leave the body for now as a part of it. So once I've created that input, what I can do is I can basically then create the next steps, right? So if I want to do a text message, so SMS, right, would be something I would use with it. So here, I could then connect to an SMS service, right? So click send is a pretty popular one, right? I could click on the click send, set up the connection related to it, and do something with it. Another one that I may want to do inside of here, we'll go ahead and delete that. Let's do, let's say that I'm way more active in Teams than in anywhere else. So what I could do as an example is, let's go ahead and create the connection. Let's delete that. Let's go ahead and click on the plus for it. Let's go Teams, and then let's say we're going to post to a channel or something like that. So I could get a team, create a team meeting, list teams, respond. see more, right? So all the teams post a message in a channel, and then I could sign in. And then for my sign in then basically afterwards, as we see this, we should be able to see basically then that detail inside of here. So then post as Flowbot or as a user, so we'll say it. We'll post in a specific channel is what we'll do as a part of this, right? Or I can post to a group chat potentially, right? So team-wise, we'll add this to our demo team. And for our channel, we'll go ahead and add, for example, the content that's there, the general channel. And then I could say priority email. And then what I could do is then add the body that I passed from the Copilot inside of here that would then be displayed, right? Finally, what I could do is do way more, right? You could do like conditionals. You could say, great, now that I did that, add a parallel path, or add an approval requirement, or add this, or add that, right? You can just keep on going and going from here, basically, to get to that result that's needed. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this my SSI inbox organizer as an example for the flow. And then I'm going to go ahead and save this away and go ahead and then publish it as well so that it is basically ready and live in production for me to access. So from there, what I can now do is I can actually go back into our Copilot Studio, click on Done, and what we should see hopefully here is that that particular flow is now accessible. So there it is, the inbox organizer, and I can click on it, and from here now, what I can do is I can also attach then that body, that detail potentially that's related to it, right? And to do that, there's going to be a bunch of different variables that I may be able to access then inside of here to basically then align what that content is going to be, right? And so user email, user principal name, detail, activities, the environment variables that may be added inside of here. As you can see, there's just a lot of different things that you can then access to basically get into that particular area. And this is what's really cool about it, is that from an environment perspective, one of the things that you can have your development team do is they can extend basically the environment and add plugins to the environment that are then accessible then via basically our Copilot Studio inside of here. So this would then allow for you basically to then interact or then have that detail that you could then pass, for example, then to that particular Power Automate as a process inside of here. So I'm not showing all of the details here, obviously, as we go through it, but the result here is that we have a trigger that fires off then this particular agent that we can then use as we go through that process, right? And we can do it a couple of different ways too. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to save this to start. We have an error. We're still going to save it because the body that I pass is actually a string, and the priority email right now that I've actually formatted here is a Boolean value. So once again, you would be able to go through and change some of that as well. But what we're going to want to do here from a topic perspective is basically potentially add additional topics, right? And so once again, you can do that same pattern. You could do a topic. With that topic, you could define what is that trigger that's related to it. You can basically identify, for example here, that when it is triggered by an agent, right? And that's something I think I missed on the other one. So let's go back to the other one really quickly here to make sure that we add that correctly. We'll leave this. So we want this trigger then to basically be called when it's triggered by an agent, right? So write a short description of what it does, or a message is received, or an event is received, right? Or on redirect, or when an AI response is generated, right? So there's different types of trigger points that you can use then to really then align what you're going to be then interacting with. So it might be an event, and I'll discard everything as a part of it, and maybe that event is going to be a specific event name that you have inside of your plugin that accesses that, right? So the cool thing about this though is that you can define then what those triggers are, so that way then when it comes to how it is processed, it will basically then use that as part of that particular process inside of our system. And so there's a lot of different areas like activity removed or received as a part of it. What is that activity type that's inside of here? A message, a command, a suggestion that came through it. It was invoked by something. It had a response that's related to it. So once again, I'm just kind of cracking open here what you can do to trigger it, but from there, you set up that trigger. You basically then interact with it from that trigger perspective in the topic, and then from that topic perspective, you can basically go through and then execute what that topic is to then do those particular actions as a part of it. So I know we're getting to time here. We started about a minute late as a part of this, so we were not going to be able to go through all of the additional steps. One of the things I want to note here is that, remember, from a Stoneridge perspective, we do have training on this that we have been creating, that if you've got questions around and you want to understand more about then how to link these automated agents to then basically tackle some of these different scenarios, I highly recommend that you reach out to us, because we can then go deeper into really what your business system requirement is. And one of the things that the team has tackled, Tracy's on this call as well, as we go through this, but at a high level, what we have designed as part of this is kind of a journey for you too, where we can start at different levels, obviously, when we go through this, to make sure then that we align towards maybe you just need data and governance to start, or maybe what you need is actually a simulation, as we call it, where we take a business scenario and we build out this particular agent then to tackle those types of scenarios. Those, we're getting a lot of people that are asking about that, and we're doing that work then as well as we go through this process. So if you are curious, feel free to reach out to us and we can get to more detail around that as well. So with that though, I know we had limited time. I'm going to go ahead and start getting things kind of wrapped up here as a part of it. I guess the key thing here would be, if you have questions, make sure that you reach out to us. For subsequent confabs, we will be going over other details. We'll probably have like a lessons learned type of mentality as well here, where I kind of gave you some of the tidbits as we were going through Copilot Studio, but you may want to, for example, have a different scenario that we want to drill into. Well, we should go ahead and create those as an example. And as we have those learnings, we like to share that on Confab. So that way, when you start going into really the environment, you know exactly what you're getting into as part of that process. All right, so with that, thank you again, everyone, for your time. Thank you, everyone that's been on chat. Like you said, Rob, crawl, walk, run. Absolutely. I said this last year, more towards the July time period. If you are not investing in your AI strategy now, I can pretty much guarantee you that you're going to be left in the dust. And I don't say that to scare you, because I'm not a FUD person, but what I will say is that I am seeing so many people now asking about AI enablement around all of the Dynamics and M365 products. I highly recommend, once again, that you start digging into this deeper, because if you're listening to the negative Nelly commentations, the comments that are on the news, I'm just going to tell you, they don't get a lot of what the AI enablement is. And when you have people that are talking from a political or from a non-educated perspective with the topics that we're addressing, you kind of know where that goes typically if you've lived a very fruitful life. So with that though, thank you again, everyone. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you 2 weeks from now on our next confab as we explore other business system capabilities on the Microsoft platform. Have a good one, and see you soon.